We said that there's this process where people have to ceremonially wave the sacrificial parts of the korban, and the Kohen basically puts his hands underneath and waves with him. And we mentioned that women don't do this. There's no negia problem, and there's two exceptions where it's the sota and the nazira. They do have the Kohen come in there. So is it a negia problem? No, because in the temple they're worn, just like other people. It's not a negia that's based on chibur or anything like that. It's commanded by the Torah, so it's not so much of a problem. But normally women don't do that. We'll see that a few halachas later. Okay, let's lead halacha 10. Ezehu chazek kol roetha karka lamala ada savar. That's the bottom side of the animal. Animals walk on all fours. The kinds of animals at least offer in the temple on all fours. So this is the bottom side of the animal. Okay, and it goes all the way up to the animal's neck. Okay, it goes basically in that direction. Animals don't stand on their hind legs. Bears sometimes do, but cows don't really do that type of thing, and neither do sheep. Okay, they're just not built for it. Lamata ada kares, and it goes down the animal. If the animal were standing up, which it's not doing, it would go until it's basically its stomach area. Okay, so it basically covers its ribs. And he takes with it two ribs, one on each side. What is the zroa? Oh, this is a good question. The forearm. Ha'amura. He zroa shel yamin. It's the right foreleg. Uchenegda baregel. And there's also its equivalent in the back leg, the hind leg. Hu hashok ha'amura b'chol makom. That's called the shok. Okay? So there's the foreleg, and there's the shok, and basically, so you're using your own arm. Your arm bones are different than the cow's, for example. You look at the cow over here, that you probably have your usual Rambams have a schematic here. The cow has 4 discernible long bones that you could say are part of the arm. See? There's one that connects it. They have a much broader shoulder than you. So you have, look what the cow has here. There's one arm over here and one over there. That'd be equivalent of your forearm and your upper arm. And then there's this bone over here and there's this one over here. Do you have things like that over there by the time you get to your shoulder? If you do, they're much smaller. I'm not an expert in these things, in bonology, but no, I just know phonology, but not bonology. I also know chronology a little bit, but not how animal bones work and human bones. But you don't have the equivalent necessarily. You have remember homologous structures?
Yeah. So yeah. It should be homologous. The question is from where to where.
Yeah, but not entirely. You don't have hooves,
Yeah, but like the bone structure is largely the same.
Yeah. Kind of amazing God decided to do that a lot of his creatures have similar bone structures. I mean the shapes are very different, but
the wrist.
Yeah, that's the equivalent to the wrist.
Is equivalent to
the elbow,
like, and that's like up, like in them sort of.
Yeah,
and then the shoulder's like all the way up here.
Okay,
so yeah, it would be this equivalent.
Okay, so but you're not an animal, so we're not going to do that. Anyways, after we do this ceremonial waving, what happens? Wait, am I still on the right page? Hold on a second. I think I lost it. Okay. By the way, there's a machlokes. We have to mention this, like your charts point out. The Rambam says it's the 2 lower bones, the 2 long bones, basically the equivalent of your forearm and your upper arm. But they say Rashi and others say it's the 2 arms above that, the 2 bones above that. In this schematic, he says it's Gimel and Dalet, but there's another opinion that says it's Bet and Gimel. Okay, that's the forearm. Machlokas. So I guess the Sanhedrin will have to decide this one when the time comes. Nowadays, if you do chulin, so there is a thing that you do have to give Zeron l'chayayim and the keva to the Kohen, the matnos kahuna. Same machlokas there. So the question is, what do they do with that? Do people do it? Some people are machmir, or some people get out of it. How does the slaughterhouse get around this, having to give away so much meat to Kohanim? They get a Goyen partnership with them. The guy doesn't have to do it. It's like another ha'arama. Did they used to have slaughterhouses back in Chazal's time? They had a butcher. They had a guy who was the regular butcher, but they didn't have like a large-scale industrial slaughterhouse.
No, of course not.
No, that's something that only came out with the Industrial Revolution, as you know. Hold on a second. We're getting questions come in. Let's see if they're relevant. No, it's not. I don't know. Why was I getting notification of questions? There's nothing here. Okay. Next. After these things are waved, he salts the emurim, those are the entrails, and he burns them on the altar. But the chazeh and the shok, that's the breast of the animal, and this shok, that's the back leg, are eaten by the kohanim after cooking, of course. Shnemar kief chazeh atnufa with shokat truma. The chazeh atnufa, the breast that had been waved, and the hind leg that had been donated. Truma usually means, by the way, donation is a very modern, inaccurate translation. It's more like it was lifted up. Tnufa means it was waved, and truma means it had been lifted up ceremoniously, which means it's a part that goes to the kohanim. Usually when something is truma, it's lifted up and separated, it goes to the kohanim. So there are many different types of foods that are called truma. When you have a crop of grape juice and wine, so the grapes and wine you give to the kohen are called truma. And when you make some bread and you mix up the dough, so the challah is called the truma. And when you have this animal that is going to be sacrificially eaten, the part that goes to the kohen is called the truma. Okay. So it doesn't mean donation necessarily. Nowadays, I remember when I came to Israel, my friend was giving some money, saying they give truma. I thought, like, what, you're kohanim or something? You take some money out of your wallet, that's a truma? No, it means modern word to donate. Okay. Ushar shlabim ne'chala ba'alim. And the rest of this peace offering is eaten by the owners. Well, actually, the owners can share with others. They don't get to take this as their property for consumption until the entrails have been burned on the altar. Why? These are the three things that were lifted up and waved: the entrails, the shok, and the chazeh. So the kohanim aren't supposed to take their part before God takes his. That's how you remember it. What?
Why wouldn't the modern Hebrew word? Why would it be truma instead of nedavah?
It's a good question, right? Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think nedavah is too closely related to lahit nadev, which means to volunteer oneself. So trumas, donations. Yeah, it's a question. Where they get the word misrad from? For a lot of Rishonim, the word misrad doesn't work, like an office. They use the more classic Mishneh term that you find in, let's say, in Midos, a lishka. Okay, the room set aside for something. So, by the way, if you are if you're somebody here in Israel, your office is called a lishka. So, if you're a prime minister or a chief rabbi, then you have a lishka. You don't have a misrad. Misrad is just the ministry, but your actual room where you get to hold court, that's called lishka. The word misrad came from the big day asrad. So, so it seems that the first half of the pasuk, which talks about the begadim of the srad, are the big day kahuna. That's how the wordsmiths thought of it. But then, what happened? The pshat, at least according to Rashi and others, is big day asrad is the coverings of the temple vessels. The ones that are mentioned at the end of Bamidbar. Cover the Aron with the Parochas and two more layers. Cover the menorah so that no one sees any of the vessels when the Mikdash was traveling. That's a big day asrad. Right. So the ones who were in wordsmith said, well, Bisrad refers to the big day kahuna in general. So someone who has a position, that's what it means. Sin reish dalid. But the problem is the shorish's position is sin reish reish. Okay, a srara. So srad, they said, so a person with a position has a misrad. You had a mem to it. You make a word misrad, office, but it doesn't work because according to these Rishonim, that's not what the shorish srad worked. Okay, so it's how we decide to make new words. I'm very happy. One of the words I made up is actually part of the dictionary now. People use it. They hit the bar mates to come of age. Okay, from the word bar mitzvah. So that's good. That caught on. Yeah, it's terrible. Well, I used to make up words all the time. I'm glad something stuck. Okay. The bread that they wave with the Thanksgiving offering and with the ram of the Nazir. That's also the forearm that's cooked by the Nazir. It has to be eaten. Those are eaten by who? Get eaten by the Kohanim. The rest of the bread and the rest of the meat of these korbanot are eaten by the owners. This bread that he waves with the chazeh and the shok that go to the kohanim, the breast and the hind leg, those are called the muram, that which was raised up from the word truma, by the way. Right. Mitodah. So it's a hufal. The harim is a hifil, and that means the active one doing it. And huram means that which was lifted up. Muram is the present tense of huram. Huram is past tense. And when you put them all together, you take the cooked foreleg and the hind leg and the breast and this bread that was waved. Heina nikrim muram me el nazir. Those are called the parts that are raised up for the el nazir, and not munaf. They could have called it munaf. A word you always has is muram. Okay, and you don't heard the word munaf because in the Torah it says asher hunaf vasher huram. That's that which had been waved and that which had been raised up. So they call this the munaf, that which was that which is raised. But I said I never saw munaf. Okay, maybe me or somewhere else. I'm not that well read enough to say for certain that it's not anywhere else, but you don't really see a term. You see muram and huram, but you don't see munaf, and hunaf is only once in the Torah. Okay. Let's see here. Halechem amuram. Let's go to this bread that's raised from the Torah. Sefek trumahu. It never calls it truma in the Torah. The bread that goes. Remember the nazir. The person bringing the Torah brings a lot of bread, and some of it goes to the kohanim, but it's never called truma. But it's in the role of usually the lechem that's given, the bread that's given to the kohanim, which is usually called truma. So it says lepichach ein chayavim alav mita b'chomesh katruma. Therefore, if a person were to, what Ram leaves out, chayavim misa v'chomesh katruma means a misa b'dei shamayim. There's something called me'ilah. That's a person misuses temple property. And he did it b'shogeg. Okay, b'mezid, so he's chayav misa, and b'shogeg he has to atone for this and he has to pay it back. So misa v'chomesh means either he's to be punished with death min hashamayim, or chomesh, which means pay back 125% of what he, the cash value of what he took for himself, he misused. And here in this case, because he says the suffix, normally if I'd eaten truma bread, that's an act of me'ilah. If I did it on purpose, heaven should put me to death, chas v'shalom. And if I did it b'shogeg, I would have to pay back the value of the bread plus another 25%. But this bread, we're suffix truma, so we'll just doesn't have to suffer the punishment. What happened to suffix derisa l'chumra? Isn't this a derisa question? Okay. Well, the next statement is eno midamea ketruma. It doesn't cause a taroves to become considered still truma. To dilute truma, if a little bit of truma falls into, I don't know, take some truma wheat, drop it into your barrel of wheat kernels. So is it batal b'shishim? No, it takes a lot more. That's called miduma. Okay, from the word dema, which means tears, by the way. Okay, so it takes a lot more to dilute the truma until you could say that's batal, and until then, the whole thing's called miduma. So this bread, if it falls in among other bread, will not turn it into miduma because of the suffix. But miduma itself is an isser d'rabbanan. Okay, so I can understand suffix d'rabbanan l'kula. What about the first case? If it's suffix truma, I would say so. He's not chayiv misa misafik, fine, but he doesn't have to give the and the karen chumash. I guess you could say even though it's a derisa din, it's a suffix. He doesn't have to pay back 125% because he only pays the penalty or gets the punishment if it's certain that he did it. When it comes to averos, the consequence of the avera, suffix the rabbanon, I guess suffix the derisa the chumra means don't do it. But when we're talking finally about restitution or punishment, suffix derisa is not chumra. Okay. For example, you want to convict someone for murder. You're misupuk about that. So there's no okay. He's a suffix murderer, so we'll give him the death penalty for that. Okay. That's the answer to that question that came up. Okay. Let's have a drink. Let's say a kohen's bring a korban toda. So we said also already that a kohen brings the korban, so it's his choice to just do all the service, right? Yeah, it's a harei sha'ar lechem nechabolim ketodat Yisrael. So some of the bread is taken and they wave it and everything, and that bread goes to the kohanim who are on duty to eat. Because who eats the korbanos every day? The kohanim on duty. But the rest of the bread is like any other Israelites meat from a bread from a korban toda. The rest of the bread is not a mincha that has to be eaten by the kohanim or burned on the altar. It's just bread that a person is obligated to have with his meal. By the way, what does it mean? If you have a toda, so you're going to bring a lot of bread. And a toda is a whole animal. Only some is given to kohen, some is burnt on the altar. It's a lot of meat. So I guess you're supposed to have a lot of bread to go around with all this meat. Okay. Shtaim shehiviu shlamim b'shutafut. Two people, sorry. They bring peace offering in partnership. Hayachad menif b'shut chaviro. So one of them does this act of waving. don't have to have both of them do it. Afilu heimeyal, let's say 100 in partnership, which you could technically do. This is obviously hyperbolic. It doesn't matter what number. The Rambam is just trying to say that it doesn't matter. Echad menif al yedei kulan. Just by the way, shchita, it only takes one person to do shchita. The Gemara entertains. What happens if you have two people with, like, remember those big saws that they used to cut the logs with? Obviously, a saw that's toothed cannot be used for shchita. Right. You have to have something smooth, but something that's long. So you had two people pulling the knife back and forth all day long without pressing, and it's a smooth knife. So technically, you could accomplish an act of shchita like that, right? But it's good enough that one person shech the korban for everybody, right? So too, it's good enough that one person waive these sacrificial portions on behalf of everybody else. Masha'enkim basmicha, which is not the case with smicha. What is that implying? That if you have 100 people who are bringing a shlamim, so they get online, and every one of them has to offer a confession while leaning on the shlamim. Later, Rambam's going to say, wait, shlamim, there's a confession? I understand an olah is for a person missed out on doing a mitzvah. And chatas and asham, a person sinned. But what's the confession upon a shlamim, peace offering? No, he confesses to God, he acknowledges God's kindness to him. That's also a form of confession. By the way, Rabbi Bamberger pointed out, the shoresh, okay, that's a little vort for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur time. The shoresh for confession and thanksgiving is the same. The shoresh is yud dalet hey. In the hifiel, it means to thank, lahodot, okay, and the yud becomes a vav. And in the hit pa'el, it means to confess, lahit wadot, to confess. Why? Because we're human. So I was telling someone last week, and I remember I had a dream about this also. No one's going to come and apologize. You cannot sit down and wait. Oh, that person wronged me a while ago. He deserves an apology. Or that person made public statements that were totally wrong and misled the tzibur, perhaps even caused great harm to people. He should publicly recant, make a public apology. Yeah, you got to wait. What's the hyperbolic expression? Just keep waiting. It's not going to happen. People don't do that. Human beings have a very hard time acknowledging when they're wrong. Okay? Acknowledging the other. So confessing is difficult. Really confessing sincerely in front of someone that someone's wrong and in front of God properly. Doing what we did wrong. We were talking about this last year. We confess and then we do our sins again. So really confessing and really meaning it is a sublime mitzvah that's very hard to achieve. And thanking someone properly, actually, modeh al ha'emet, acknowledging, by the way, same shoresh, same words. To thank is also to acknowledge. You first have to acknowledge. It's very difficult. Our human nature makes it that we are not born thankful. Children aren't like that, but you have to teach them right away. Like Rabbi Miller used to say, you have to teach children to say thank you. And Chazal said, God doesn't need your bracha, by the way. God doesn't need you to say a blessing on the water or on the pizza, whatever it may be. It's for you. It's to instill upon you proper deos. Which, by the way, is something I learned from also great men who experienced tragedy. There's some people who, unfortunately, and I'm not going to judge them, they experience tragedy and they take it out against God, and then they say, you know what? Forget these mitzvahs God caused. If he is God or he is around, then he allowed such terrible things to happen to me. I'm no longer mitzvahs. I'm not into this tefillin or kashrus thing anymore. I've met people like that. As a matter of fact, I visited someone in the hospital on one sukkah morning. It was the afternoon. We brought the lulav and esrog to them, and people are excited. Oh, good! Someone finally brought a lulav and esrog. They can't go into the sukkah, but it was. We did this a few years, and one guy says, if he's so God, how do you let me end up here? I was laid up in the hospital. Okay, so some people don't understand. What I learned from the great men who experienced tragedy is that really you're human. Adam Yesodom Afar, Sofole Afar. Man is basically dirt. You're animated dirt. Your natural tendency is to have difficulties in life. You're going to have illness, and eventually you're going to die and turn back into dirt. That's all of us. So it's through God's grace that you actually enjoy a large part of it, and He gives you the capacity to take care of yourself and to give unto others. Right? You have to see it that way. So the commandments that He gave you, just basically putting on your talis and tefillin every morning and then praying, God doesn't need that. You're not helping Him in any way whatsoever. He gave you those commandments for your own good. The person who experiences tragedy takes comfort in his mitzvahs. At least, for whatever reason, he experienced firsthand and in person what it's like to, be dirt. Okay, you are made of dirt, so you're going to have illness. You're going to have tragedy, but your mitzvahs save you. when you connect to God through keeping the commandments properly, and you avoid that which God told you to avoid, you help yourself. The tov lach, the mitzvahs are there; they're good for you. So like I said, the great men who experience tragedy, they put on their tefillin every morning, and it strengthens them. They pray every morning, and it strengthens them. God gave it to them so they could be strong in His service, and they strengthen their mind and their body. And that's how we should approach the commandments. That's how should take stock in that. We realize what commandments are actually good for us. What are we? How are we being lax every year, and what are we doing that actually harms ourselves? A lot of averos that we commit or we think about committing, we say, "No, what harm is done?" Grum talks about, let's say, Shmir Sinai. What I do, I didn't do anything wrong. Nothing happened. I just looked. No, that's an avera. That harms your soul. And if you protect your mind, say, "Oh, I just heard it." Hearing profanity has a profound effect on yourself. I don't know. There's some people they have wise things to say, and then sometimes just utter profanities. They have. It's okay, I understand the Yetzer Hara of anger, but some people it's very easy. They even write, curse words. You can't do that. Why? Because they're hearing it. You hear it, it becomes part of you. You see things you shouldn't see. You hear things you shouldn't hear. You eat things you shouldn't eat. This isn't metaphysical. This actually has an effect on what comes out. You're eating things that are not proper, so you're going to be an improper person. So yeah, thank God for the mitzvahs they refine us. And then it reminds us, and how many mitzvahs do we not have available to us? How many of us have offered a korban? How many of us have actually gone to the temple and been able to offer something properly? That's a transformative experience that we're lacking. And that's why we have to seek this year, like every year, to commit not only to avoid everything we've done wrong until this point, double our efforts not to do it again. We also have to take upon ourselves to start keeping the commandments, the positive ones that with which we have been lax. One example, perhaps we're not wearing our tefillin long enough. Many of us, so happens that we don't have time in the morning, so we have to go to a quickie minyan, chakras, Oh, it's Vasikin. Yeah, but maybe we're not taking proper time to even think about what we're doing. That happened to me sometimes. Maybe we're not treating your just friends and family properly. I said last week, to whom do you have to apologize? From whom do you have to ask mechila? So people go to their best friend. Are you mochel you? I said, yeah, he's your best friend. You don't. Yeah. Of course he's mochel you. He's not upset. He sits across from you and learning Torah every day. The guy who's not talking to you, the guy who stormed out in anger because you said something that was offensive to him, your wife. Those are people to whom you have to apologize. The people who you hurt every day, where you hurt and now you're not in contact. There's some people. I can imagine there are people who don't talk to family members. They had some sort of falling out or something. I don't want to talk to you again. So what normal people don't want to talk to their brother again or to their father, they talk to him 5 minutes later. But some people get really hung up on this. I don't want to see him again. And then they don't talk to, their closest relative for 20 years. That's not what God intended. Even if and this is the case, even if they were totally wrong, you have to reach out. You're giving them a chance by reaching out. You give them a chance to repent. Okay, so yeah. Okay, let's get back to this. God should bring us to situations where we get to keep more mitzvahs. So, by the way, I intend to go to the temple on the 4th day of Sukkot this year, early in the morning. Not the earliest, because God willing, take the family. So please, everybody, come to us. And God willing, by the time that rolls around, we'll be there attending the entire temple service. It should be quite wonderful. What are we over here? You're on Yudalit. Hayal Bala Todah Kohen. We just read that. Shnayim Sheviu. We read that also. And basically, we said smicha means everybody's going to have to put their hands on the animal. Haytha Isha Ba'alaf HaKorban. We mentioned this halacha before. So there's a woman who is bringing the korban. Aval Kohen Eina Minifa. So she does not do this waving service. She's exempt. Some people say, by the way, so she can't do it. So she instructs her male relative to do it for her. And some say, no, it's just not done. Aval Kohen Meniv. So the Kohen does it. With the male relative or not, I don't know. The korban needs to have this act of waving. But she is unqualified to do such a thing, unless, like we said, it's the cases that the Ram is going to say the exceptions. Okay. The ones who do it are sotah. Here it's within the samech, so it's a sotah, but the shorish of sotah is with the sin. Okay, the wayward woman or the Nazaritis. Women take the vow of Nazirut just like men. So there's a case where the man, by the way, the husband could say, revoke it. Hafaras Nadarm is a type of nether. So certain circumstances, he could tell her no way, no how. One of the considerations Gemara talks about is why wouldn't a man want his wife to be a Nizirah? Well, if she's not drinking wine, it's going to affect her appearance and her health. Okay, or if she's going to be drinking wine, one consideration is at the end of this Niziruth, let's say she chooses to be a Nizirah for 2 months. So I don't know, many women, they don't drink wine and they'll go near the cemetery for 2 months and they could afford the korban at the end. So the husband's not going to have a problem. And then he realizes, oh, she's going to come home bald. Okay, she's going to, right there in the temple, she's going to take off her merpachat and she's going to shave herself there. And it's like, okay, I want a bald wife. And yeah, eventually 6 months later, she'll have hair again. But it's Chazal, based on other psukim and also, I guess, normal human sensation, realize that many women, their essence of their beauty is in a large part due to the hair, among other things. Okay, and women who have absolutely no hair are critically lacking one part of their beauty. So this could be a reason why a man would want to say or stop his wife from becoming a Nazaretus. Okay, so there you go. Just considerations. So don't watch what you say. Okay. Let's see here. Where were we? Okay. Kamosha Biarnu, these were explained elsewhere. Uthnufa kodemeth lagasha b'chol makom. Tnufa comes before Hagasha. What's Hagasha? That's bringing it close to the Mizbeach. Okay. So they have to bring it to the Mizbeach. And the Kohen, it says about the Nazira, for example, and the Sota. So they have to bring it. Okay. So then it says Vihi Gisho El Kohen. Okay. He has to bring it to the Kohen. So the Tnufa happens before the Hagasha. Okay. In all circumstances. Okay. Next, Hagasha is with you have it with a dot in the gimel or no dot? Is it Hagasha or Hagasha?
Hagasha.
Why is that? Why is there a dot in the gimel? What's the shoresh?
And drop none.
Yes, very good. Nigash, but even in Nigash, that's a nifal, and there's a dot in the gimel to make up for the nun of the shoresh. Okay, so like Nisa, Rumva Nisa should be Ninsa. Okay, so Lagasha. So why Yigash love Yehuda? Okay. So there's a dot in the gimel to make up for the missing the missing nun. Okay, the chol makom, and you have these shorashim that have 3 letters. When you have a weak yud or a weak hey or a weak lamid at the beginning of the shoresh, in the imperative form it just drops off. So lech, that means go. There's no hey there. Kach, there's no lamid beforehand. Something that you do have lekach is in the Torah, but usually it's kach. Shave instead of yeshev with the yud, and in this case, gosh gesh hala. There's no nun. It's not nechesh or nechosh. It's gesh. In all these cases, what other examples can we find? Okay, we get enough to say. There's no yitzay. Okay, so in all those cases, you have a yud, a nun, a lamid, or hey at the beginning of the shoresh. It drops off in the imperative. And you have a 2-letter word for the imperative. Okay. Keitzad hu alechem shemivima todah. Well, what's the deal with the bread that they bring with the Toda? Oh, this is good. Take out your calculators. There's a lot of flour here. I did all the calculations already. Okay. Lokach esrim isaron solet. That's 20 isaron. We said as isaron based on the lowest measurements, which we're going to use. An isaron is 2.6 liters of flour. So 20 isaron is basically 2.16. 2.16 times 20.
Oh,
so it's basically 4.32. Well more than 40 liters of flour. Okay, you have that's what this involves. You're going to bring a toda, so you have to get 40.32 liters of flour according to the most makel, but perhaps maybe accurate shita. 2.16. 2.16 times 20 comes out to 40.32.
No, it'd be 43.2.
Yeah, 43.2. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. 43. I think I said it. We'll go back in the video. At a certain point, it said 43. Well, either way, it's well more than 40 liters of flour. Okay, the fine flour. 10 esronim, that means half of this, the equivalent of 21.6 liters of flour or so, is to be made leavened, and another 10 are to be made matzah. Half leavened, half matzah. So 21.6 liters of leavened and 21.6 liters of unleavened. Matzah in this case does not mean what you think matzah means. It doesn't mean open up a box of Manischewitz or Strites, machine-made crackers. And what? Well, I don't know. It's not just a lafa. There's many ways to make matzah, and it's oily also. The Rambam's going to describe 5 ways, for example, to make matzah in the temple. Okay, and lechem apanim is a 6th way. That's not like the other menachos. So matzah just means not leavened. Chametz means leavened. You could have 2 breads that are very similar to each other in their ingredients and the way they were baked and their form and even their consistency, but one is chametz and one is matzah. Why? Matzah you made quickly without letting leavening, whereas the one that's chametz, either you let the dough sit for a while or you added something as a leavening agent, which is usually the sourdough. Drop sourdough in there and mix it in. Okay. Sacrificial chametz, these 10 that are going to be leavened, oseh otham eser chaloth. The 10 isronot that are to be made leavened become 10 cakes. So each cake is basically the equivalent of a whole isaron. Each cake has 2.16 liters of flour in there. And by the way, you do your calculation. The density of flour is about 8 grams per cc on average, something around there. Hold on 1 second. Something suspicious going on here. Okay. So you have that comes out to. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so you have, if you have what do you call it? 2.16 liters of flour per cake, right? And each liter is basically weighs about 80 grams. So that comes out to 1.73 kilos per isaron. So you have a 1.73 kilo cake. I don't know, the big Rebbe challahs that they have at weddings or at titches for the Rebbe. How many kilo is that? By the way, you have 10 of these almost 2 kilogram challahs that are chametz. That's a lot of bread, okay? So it says here, these 10 make it into 10 loaves. Normally in the temple, you're not supposed to have leavened bread.
I was about to ask.
Okay, so here's the answer. You bring some sourdough to do it, which is the way they used to use it. Would you have to use sourdough nowadays? Maybe you could bring baker's yeast to do it. Okay, I don't know. So here goes. Mevisa or kadechi mutzan. You bring enough sourdough, for that ratio. Basically, you're a baker. You know how much sourdough. You ever make sourdough and make sourdough bread? There's a certain amount of sourdough you're supposed to put into the mix. So here you have, I don't know, 21.6 liters of flour to make your bread. So you're going to use a certain amount of that. The notno letoch hamidah. You put into the measuring vessel. Ubimale et hamidah. And then you fill it with the flour. First put in the sourdough and then you measure it, which means the sourdough is going to reduce the actual flour you're using. You brought 21.6 liters of flour and you're going to pour it into this vessel, but the sourdough is already in it, so it's gonna, you're gonna lose some flour in the process. Afal pisha sofa liot chasira yatera. At the end, there's gonna be a discrepancy. It's like I had a liter of water and I'm putting in a few drops of wine. Obviously, it's going to be now more than a liter of water here because the wine adds to the volume. Okay, mipnei hasaor, because of the sourdough in there. Shepamim yeh ava v'koshes. Sometimes it's going to be thick and hard. Ufamim rach, sometimes soft, which means, by the way, what's the softness due to? More production of gases, and that increases the volume, lowers the density. Ein mashgichim ela al midata ata. We just look at the measurement now. Okay, what's in front of our face before you start, kneading it. Varehu modedi saroni saron shlemim, and you have to have full esronot in the temple. That's what it is. So you're gonna make 10 esronot. So the kohanim bring you 10 vessels. So that's an isaron each, and he puts in first some sourdough into the bottom of each vessel, however much sourdough it's necessary. So I guess the temple has a supply of this, or the person's supposed to bring his own sourdough, and he puts in this fine wheat into there, the flour, and then he mixes it. V'asara esronim shel matzah, the 10 esronim of matzah, the other half of his meal offering, which is not really an offering, like I just said, it's also 21.6 liters or so of this flour is going to be used to make matzah, unleavened bread, not crackers. Osemeyan shloshim chalot shabot. He used to make 30 cakes instead of 10, 30. So each of these is a third the size of those big Rebbe challahs. The Rebbe challahs were made from 21.6 liters of flour and therefore have a weight of about 1.73 kilos in flour. not counting the water and the oil used to make it, so it's going to weigh more, right? Whereas these ones are a third of each, so it's 0.72 liters of flour per cake. Okay, the Mazoth cakes, as Yoshua used to like to say. Okay, so he's supposed to make them 30 cakes that are equal in mass. Eser chalot mikomin, 10 cakes, 30 cakes in total, 10 cakes each of a different type of matzah. What? Eser chalot mafei tanur. 10 of these matzahs are to be baked in the oven, baked cakes. Eser chalot rikikin, and 10 flatbreads. Doesn't rikikin like we saw many times. Rashi and Gemaras and Rashi, Ramban, and Onkelos all point out that the Targum of rikikin in the Torah is ispogim, sponges. Okay, it's flat, but it's also spongy. Okay, there was I don't know this. I just put out a video.
Like that, Ethiopian bread.
Okay, well, Ethiopian bread that is made out of teff. It's not a true grain.
Right,
it's a type of kidney, but yeah,
similar.
It would be. So there are many ways you can make a rakik.
Yeah.
Now there's someone very very irritating because I remember I used to get into discussions. I thought we were arguing in honesty, but he just likes to misrepresent things, like to say like this. He was against people eating hard matzah, soft matzah. And he said the Ramah says we eat rikikin. Rikikin means flat cracker bread. But it's true, the Ramah says our minhag is to make them flat. But the Ramah lived before they started making cracker matzah. And that word that the Ramah is using means flat, but also soft and spongy, like we pointed out.
Yeah.
So it's intentionally misleading people and think like, yes, that which we do has always been done. There's a precedent for eating hard cracker matzah. It's even the Ramah, but it's not. Okay. The Eser Chaloth Murbecheth. So 10 are murbecheth. What's murbecheth? That's mentioned in the Torah. Revucha means doing something with the oil. And he's going to explain right now. It means a type of fry thing. V'chetzat here murbechet. So what is murbechet? What's the shortest of murbechet? Reish bet kaf. Okay, not reish kaf bet, and not bet reish kaf. Okay, but what does it mean? Cholei dotah berotchim. So he's to scald it in hot water. That means he takes the soleth and he pours hot water over it, not dip it into hot water. Similar in bagels. How do you make bagels? You're supposed to make a light dough or a heavy dough, but you drop it into water before baking it. Okay. So in this case, there's a lot of hot water involved. And then it's baked a little bit. Right? And then he fries it. Kuleh in this case means harsh roasting. It means so hot water scalding, baking it a little bit, and then throwing it onto a frying pan. A lefas is a frying pan. So he fries it there in the oil. The same way we do sufganin. And sufganin haven't changed. Sufganin has always been like I think it was Rambam's father to say in his name. Maimon Hadayan says the minhag is to eat sufganin dafka on Hanukkah, which is so the minhag of eating jelly donuts. It's a new thing that you stuff them with jelly, but it's the way it's been done, has always been done. The minhag of eating basically the equivalent of a jelly donut is predates even the first latke by hundreds and hundreds of years.
Wow.
Okay? So that's how you make jelly donuts. Umarbin b'shamna, and you really lay it on the oil, okay, in order to fry it. The other two are not so oily. The other two are baked, just baked. One's a cake and baked regular bread baked in the oven, and one's flat. V'zohu haribuch ha'amur b'chol makom. So that's what ribuch is. When the Torah says it, when Chazal are talking about ribuch, it means deep frying. Okay. Yeah. So this makes me actually kind of hungry. One thing I take comfort in the fact that in this country you can't get really decent American donuts. Well, now it's becoming more common. Okay, fine. So you live without donuts. They don't have anything the equivalent of Entenmann's or Francois. What's Entenmann's? Entenmann's are good if you eat chalav stam, but they have an OU on them. So you have to go to America and eat some Entenmann's. That's our minhag. Okay, fine. My grandfather of blessed memory was the foreman at the Francois Bakery in Williamsburg, and they were making a donut that was parv. But Entenmann's like chocolate frosted donut that was parv. So that was good. So when my grandfather came around, he used to bring us the water challah and the rye bread. I couldn't stand rye bread, and those donuts. But decent jelly donuts you don't get in this country. You can't go to the store, even if you can find donuts, they won't give you a jelly donut. But when do they have jelly donuts here? Right after Sukkot. Sukkot is out, and they already start getting to Hanukkah mode. So thank God, at least there are people who are trying to make a buck, and the jelly donuts are available 2 months out of the year. I was thinking perhaps it's good, Chacham in a Varosho, to just freeze a whole bunch for everything, but they wouldn't last around the house. You can only do it. Besides, there's a minhag to keep, kol marbe ariza meshubach. So even if I were to save 20 jelly donuts around Hanukkah time, they wouldn't last until Tuesday. Okay. So uvchama shemen hu oseh hashloshim chalot. How much oil goes into these 30 cakes of matzah? By the way, think about it. How much oil? Bachatzi log shemen, half a log of shemen. Wait, how much is a log? We said a log is about 300 ml. When we say revius, by the way, it's usually revius of a log, not revius hahin. The Torah always mentions revius hahin. That's about 90 ml, almost a liter. A revius of a kiddush cup is a revius of a log. It's like a quarter. In America, when you say a quarter, without even thinking, it's a quarter of a dollar. But sometimes it just means a quarter of whatever you're talking about. So, and when it says chatzi log, it means a log is about 300 ml. So chatzi log is 150 ml of oil. Wait, 150 ml of oil to need basically 10 esronoth, which is 21.6 liters of flour. I don't think that'll be enough to knead it properly. You have to add basically water. In order to knead this, you have to add water. This is a tradition from Sinai. So obviously there's more water in here. And the Gemara, elsewhere we're going to see the Gemara talks about poshrin. Now, obviously a mincha there's oil and flour, but there's also warm water which is needed. Warm water, won't that make it become chametz faster? When I knead matzah with a K, I'm supposed to use dafka, the coldest water I could find, maim shalanu. That's the only way they could cool off the water. So better to put ice cubes into the water or keep it refrigerated, obviously, like we do. But in this case, they're not worried. It's in the temple. People are going to keep working. They're not going to allow it to become chametz. The kohanim are in charge. Revius mimenu lervucha. Well, this revius, by the way, is not objective. A quarter of it. It means a revius of this log. Means 75 ml of this 150. Right? The colloquial revius, and shminis lachalos or shminis the rakikin. Okay, and 1/2 of a revius, that's an eighth, and 1/8. If you do the math here, it says a quarter plus an eighth comes out to how much? A half. So you're telling me just use half the oil? No, it means the oil is already 150 ml. A revius means 75 ml, and a shminis means 32.5 ml. So 75 plus 32.5 plus 32.5 comes out to 150, and that's the chatzi log he was discussing. Okay, so here shminis means of the log, and shminis over here means of the log, and revius is of the log, but you're only using half a log to begin with. Okay, so that's how you distribute the oil among all these different cakes. So the revucha gets a quarter, gets basically half of all the oil in the process. Okay, so how much is this? How much is making revucha? We said it's 21.6 liters of flour to make these 3 types of matzah, which means this is about 7 liters of flour to make the revucha, the deep fried stuff. And you get basically 75 ml of oil to make the equivalent of bread, enough bread, fried bread for more than 7 liters of flour. Okay, so obviously there's that needs more oil than the other things. So most of it's in the pan. Okay, hachaloth, the cakes we're talking about, lo teda sola shelhem bishminith shel shemen. He oils them up with a shminis, 32.5 ml of oil. In this case, I think the lotate means he mixes it up. Okay. And then he pours in the oil and gets it mixed up, and then he kneads it. Well, feoton, and then he bakes them. The flatbreads, they only get the oil once they're fully baked. That is, they're kneaded with water. There's no oil in them. So what do? You knead them with water. They came out of the oven, then you pour oil in them. I saw this as a trick they do. Actually, it turns out this is a European thing. In America, we bake cake. Make your cake, your sponge cake, whatever it is, your chocolate cake. Don't make sponge cake. Make chocolate cake. Sponge cake, no one likes. Okay, whatever cake you're making, you eat it afterwards, right? So they're saying I saw the guy, the caterer in Israel. He baked some sort of basic cake, chocolate cake, whatever it was, and then he made a syrup. Okay, he made a syrup like a petal-based substance, like syrupy thing, that he poured onto the cake. In order to moisten the cake and sweeten the cake, like it needs sweetener, he poured basically a sugary syrup into there. Apparently that makes it taste good. So that's basically what you see here. You pour the oil onto the baked bread afterwards, oil it up afterwards, and that's what they do. In Europe, I think what the minhag was, for example, they take wedding cake. The real rich people, and the aristocrats, what do? To preserve wedding cake, they pour rum all over it. Rum is full of alcohol. It's also sweet. I don't drink rum. We have some in the house, but it's made from molasses. So the rum is full of alcohol, and what does that do? That preserves the cake. So, like, I think the minhag, for example, royal folk in England, they celebrated the birth of Prince George and his siblings by eating cake from their parents' wedding. How do they still have cake? Because they soaked it full of rum and they put it in the refrigerator, so it lasts. It's preserved cake. Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah, they have all sorts of crazy things. Yeah. And they also, by the way, what's considered the fancy pants wine? What's the most, the old wine, the aged wine, right? So people who have money, they could save wine for really old things. What's the oldest wine you get in Makol around here? We have a 2020 wine rating in the Machzan. Right? So wow, it's 3 years. Wow. But the Gemara talks about really aged wine. Apparently, it's really good that way. Okay. Next, the Kohen takes. So now there's 10 cakes that are actually 10 cakes that are chametz, and that accounts for half of all the flour we're using, and the other half of flour is divided into 3 to make 3 different types of matzah. So there's 4 types of bread floating around now. Half of the bread. So there's 4 types of bread. Half of the total bread is represented by the chametz. The matzah half is actually divided into 3. The Kohen the Kohen takes from each type 4 challahs. What does that mean? So minakol, from all of them, 4 challahs, 1 of each type. Achaf mikol nemar, echad bikol korban. The bread is called a korban here. 1 cake from each kind. Let's say you took the bread, all 40. What was it? We said 43.2 liters of flour, and just baked into 4 cakes. Yatzah lo nemar arba'im el mitzvah. He made 4 types of cakes. Okay, he made one gigantic matzah, one gigantic chametz bread, and 3 other gigantic matzahs. So he discharged his obligation. This number 40 is just the mitzvah min hamuvchar, I guess, but it's not ma'akev. They still has to take out some for each of those 4 to give to the Kohen. Achaf mikol korban kashein batzeik, while they're still dough, before they're baked or boiled, whatever it is. Shein mafrishin prusa. You can't go take the whole cake and rip off some of it and now ruin its shleimus to give to the Kohen. Shnamar echad mikol korban, 1 of each type goes to the Kohen to do. Shelo yitol pras. You shouldn't take a piece. Pras doesn't mean sliced necessarily. It means how they used to break it. Chazal assume you're livtzoah as alechem. Some people ask me, don't you want a challah knife? Don't you want a challah board? I own a challah board. I own 3. Don't you own a challah knife? Yes, I have a nice collection of challah knives. Do I ever use them? Absolutely not. Okay, I'm annoyed by challah boards and challah covers and challah knives. Don't have it on the table because the Gra points out, based on history, you're supposed to set the Shabbos table or Yontif table, no bread thereon until you're ready to eat the bread. Kiddush first, and then you bring it. So everybody likes it. It's a usual thing. I remember people think I remember someone tried to. Who wasn't trying to impress me or something. They did me a favor. It's like, I set up your Shabbos table. I came home. I think it was one time. My wife had some girls over. Back before instead of guys coming over for Shabbos, girls used to come. Okay, so they set the table and I said, keep home. Wow, it was very impressive. The malach must have been the good malach must have been happy. So there was a challah board there with a challah cover and a challah knife and 2 challahs on the cover. So I walked over to it, and as I'm singing Eishes Chal, they saw me lift it up and just put it in the kitchen. Goodbye. Like, what? Yeah, that's what purists like to do. Okay, and then I don't cut the challah, even if I'm ready to eat it. Break into pieces, just rip it. Kids would fight over the challah anyways. If you don't do it that way, they'll just destroy it anyways. Okay. What about the bread that comes with the Nazir's ram when he's going to eat? he takes 6 esronoth and another 2/3, 6.6 with the bar on top, 6 and 2/3 esronoth, which comes out to, you multiply that by 2.16, 6 and 2/3 times 2.16 comes out to just about 14 or so, 14 liters of flour. Okay, and semehen esrim chaloth shavuot. That's divided into 20 cakes of equal size each, or equal mass. Enough flour for that. So you take about 14 liters of flour divided into 20. So that would come out to 0.7 or so liters per cake, if I'm not mistaken. And the chulan matzah, they're all baked as unleavened. 10 of these matzahs are to be made flat cakes, once again poured with oil. Bake them first, knead them with water, and then pour the oil on them. And the other 10 cakes, what does he do? He said you put the oil on them, you mix it with oil before you bake them. It's all baked in the oven, none of it's fried. The total oil that used for them is a total of 75 ml or so, or Revi'i Tahim. Sorry, Revi'i Talog, not Revi'i Tahim, the small Revi'i, the Kiddush cup Revi'is. So wait, well, that means that there's a lot of water has to go into here, because 75 ml of oil is not enough to knead 14 liters of flour in any reasonable way. Even machines, you go to the machine matzah factory, what do? They use very dry dough. When you make hand matzah, already the usual recipes at the classic bakeries, they use a certain amount of water. They have a whole recipe. They take, I guess they have a liter of flour and a liter of water each. That's what I've seen people using. That's to make soft Sephardic matzahs. And the Hasidic bakeries, where they make the good kind, the popular kind, so they have a certain amount of water, but that's going to be hand mixed. Oh, they're using an apparatus to really, get it going, but still, it's basically something that you have to work with your hand. The matzah crackers they make in the machines, they use hydraulic machines. There's very little water in the mix. A person can do. I told you our story. I think I made a YouTube video about it. I went to the matzah factory. I took some of the matzah off the assembly line when the assembly line fell down. This big ball of dough, basically unworkable without adding water to it. That's how dry it was. Okay, so how does the machine even mix it? So they have a hydraulic mixer, and then they have a gigantic, machine that presses it down onto the assembly line, so they could do it. So it's obvious that water has to be in this mix, because this is not sufficient oil to knead this in any reasonable way, especially because they're not using machines in the temple. Okay, so he says here that he takes this is also halacha Moshe Sinai. This is also a tradition from Moses. Okay? Moses got it straight from Sinai. While Kohen lokach behem shtei chalot, achafli komin. The Kohen takes 2 of them, one of each type. And let's see this. Shnei minei lechem sheba nazir. These 2 types of bread that the Nazirite brings when he completes his vow, and the 4 types of bread that are brought with this Todah, this Thanksgiving offering, makvin zeh et zeh. So you have to have all types. You can't say, oh, I left out one. The korban's incomplete without it. And these breads are made outside the Azara. Usually in Ezras Nashim, there's a special lishka where they do it. So that's where you're supposed to do it. By the way, this shows, I mentioned the sugya before, the Rambam talks about deep frying bread. Everything is bread. And there's, first of all, the Rambam has just described 3 types of matzah. They're obviously not crackers. Mashma, you don't have to go into a whole discussion every time Passover rolls around. Is this matzah or not? Is soft matzah? Of course it's matzah. Of course it's matzah. The Gemara is explicit about it. The Mishnahs are explicit. The Rambam is explicit. There was never a havamina that should only be crackers. Secondly, if oil is added to the mix, it's still matzah. You don't have this. They say, based on Rashi, that if you make a matzah shir at any time, water plus something else, fruit juices or oil or eggs, it's going to be chometz nukshe. So that's obviously not true. The assumption of what they did in the temple was there's water and oil in these mixes, and it's not causing a problem. You just make sure it doesn't leaven. Leaven, leaven.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, not levin. Okay. And secondly, you're talking about saying it's deep fried. Rambam just described something, basically sufganin. Yeah. You fry sufganin, and that is lechem. So why is it, you should know, based on many poskim, based on the Shulchan Aruch, by the way, the Vilna Gaon says this big machlokas. If you were to make a dough, like jelly donut dough, and deep fry it, is that even considered pas? the argument is, and I think the majority opinion says it's considered a tavshil. Nafkamina is that if you were to, I was joking about this before, if you were to eat a significant amount of jelly donut, well, thank you. If you were to eat a significant amount of jelly donut, make a meal out of it, but it's still mizonos. It doesn't become lechem. Normally, if you eat, let's say, pizza, chocolate cake, cinnamon buns, anything that's mizonos that's considered possible bekisnin, which is a lot of things we eat, chocolate chip cookies, if you're making a meal out of it, so now it's treated like bread. Wash your hands, say hamotzi, bench afterwards. So why is it that they treat jelly donuts? Yeah, I understand. They're fried and they're full of they're full of jelly, so they're literally kisanin. They fit the kisanin thing.
Yeah.
But the Rambam is saying here, no, it's lechem. Not only should it be possibly kisnin that could become lechem if you have a kaviyah suda, you make a meal out of it, it is lechem. It's not even possible to kisnin if you don't fill it with jelly, or you make it a sweet dough. You fry soft bread. You fry a soft bread dough that's made with oil and a little bit of water. So it should be lechem. So I don't understand. I remember when I was surprised, I came to this country and the rabbi was giving shir. He says, yeah, jelly donuts are considered on Hanukkah, they're considered a tavshil. Told me, yeah, but we grew up, we were taught that it's a mizonos, and it can become possible. It's possible to kiss in at least that if you were to be a 19-year-old yeshiva guy, and that's what you have. So, you eat 2 jelly donuts for breakfast every day of Hanukkah and 2 for supper. And that's your meal. Okay, so tzarich iyan gadol, because the facts of what they used to do in the temple. It's also, the Tosefta says that the bracha on all these items were hamotzi lechem in aretz. Okay, deep fried dough. And the Rambam is going to describe sooner. They have 2 different types of frying pans, 2 ways to deep fry the soft dough in the temple, and some come out crispy. Okay, good. I know my father has a hakpada that the jelly donut should be fried a little bit crispy. It's very hard to find when they do factory style, jelly donuts. They all have the same consistency. Mm-hmm. But a good jelly donut is really made with love and handmade, could be left in the fryer longer and actually have some crispiness to it. Okay, so that's a hiddur in the mitzvah. Ketzad ma'aseh b'chor v'maser v'pesach. How do they do b'chor, ma'aser, and pesach, which we saw already, or we always grouped together, similar dinim. B'chor is the firstborn animal. Ma'aser is the 10th one to leave the pen that he marked red, and pesach is pesach, or pesach is pesach. Okay. Achar shezorek daman kimo shebiarnu. After the blood is thrown, they're slaughtered. The blood is thrown on the mizbeach. Mafshit. He skins the animal. Motzi emurin, takes out the entrails. Umolachan, he salts them. Umaktiran, of course, he has to rinse the entrails also. Mm-hmm. That's not part of the problem. That's a cleaning. It's just, of course you do that. The ritual is the salting of them, and then they're burned on the altar. Ushar basar habachor, the rest of the meat of this firstborn animal, nechal konim, that's eaten by the kohanim. This is assuming the bechor made it without a mum. If bechor gets a mum before it gets to the temple, what happens? So it's no longer it's not brought as a korban.
Yeah, because it's left around.
Yatir becomes mutter to eat. Oh. It loses kedusha. So yatir is the high level of smicha that this chacham is able to look at the bechor and determine if the wound it has sustained is a mum that disqualifies it from being a korban anymore. And that's why people were trying. The Mishneh discusses people trying to pull a fast one and causing. They said, well, you're not allowed to lahatil mum. You can't damage your animal and just give it a mum so it'll become chulin again. So people would try to trick the animal into hurting itself, and then it would have a mum. So that's also not such a good thing. So the chacham who looks at these, and this, by the way, is something they have to do nowadays. A bechor is holy. It can only be treated non-holy if it actually has developed a mum. So you need. This is part of the rabbanos of knowing what's a mum in the animal, and we already saw what makes something a mum. We saw earlier. It was in Psulei Mukdashin. No, sorry, it says it over here. Isurim Mizbeach. Psulei Mukdashin we get to afterwards. Isurim Mizbeach are things l'chachila not to bring to the temple. Psulei Mukdashin is things that were already in the temple that became disqualified. Okay. Ushar Basar Bechor. The rest of that is eaten by the Kohen. Ushar Basar Maaser Nechal V'Lav. The Meiser animal is brought to the temple like Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni means bring it to Jerusalem for you to eat. No. Get to the Kohen. And the Meiser animal is bring it to the temple and make it into a korban. Afra lefume. I mentioned this before when Rosh Chodesh Elul rolled around. Now my computer algorithm or whatever it is, the computer program that supposed to have a Hebrew calendar tells me Elul is Rosh Hashanah for Behemot.
Mm.
Because that's when you're supposed to take Meiser Behemoths. It's correct, except no, Meiser Behemoth is the Meiser we Paskins from Rosh Hashanah, and it's not a new Year for the animals. New Year, it's a cutoff date, and also it's not to animals or people too, like that charlatan said. It's to eat them. He's trying to tell people to be vegans and not eat the animals, but this is the mitzvah is obviously. So like I was upset. My computer actually told me this. So the Meiser, the animal, the 10th animal is to be eaten in sacrificial purity, like Korban Pesach. Okay. Now Pesach, the Passover offering itself, which is a lamb or a goat, Nechal Limnu Yav or Limnu Yo. The way it's vowelized in the Quran, I think, is a mistake. Limnu Yo, it means the person who's registered for it in the singular. Actually, Limnu Yao.
Yeah.
Those who are registered for it, Kil Chothal. And how I know this, because usually the Baalim, even if it was one person's Korban Pesach, when you have the owner, so it's called the Baalim. Even one person's called or as in Yiddish, the Bailim. And that's also a plural form. So, and also Adunim. Even when you're referring to a slave, he has masters, Adunav, his masters. No, it's a singular. There are certain singulars that are built as plurals. And by the way, that's why the honorific, when you call someone, is with the patach, Adonai, with a patach. But an even greater honorific reserved for the pronunciation of God's name is with a kamatz. Okay, this is why you should make a difference. Know how to make the difference, because the difference. One's nai and one's nai. Okay, or nai. Nai was a kamatz. It's different ways of doing it, but as long as it's not with a patach. Let's go to the 10th parak. Oh, good. The consumption of the guilt offering and the sin offering. Guilt offering, asham, I understand. That means guilt. Chatath, is it a sin offering? I like to say that sometimes it's offered as a purification offering. That's more correct, because when there's no dagesh in the tet, so that's sin. But when there's a dagesh in the tet, it's a type of purification. Usually purification from the sin, expiation of the sin, removal of the sin, or atonement for the sin. So hold on a second. So I like purification offering better, but that's not how it's usually translated to sin offering. Okay. So that's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah for the Kohanim to eat it, because regular people cannot eat these things. As it says, well, chalu otham asher kupar bahem. There's no vav in kupar, obviously. Right? They shall eat them, and that which they have been atoned. It means the regular Jew was atoned. Okay, lechaper is the pl, it's the active form, and kupar is the pual thereof. Okay, so this person had atonement from it. So Chazal say, classic line, hakohanim ochlim uv ali mith kaparim. The Kohanim eat the meat. Sometimes the meat is consumed by the fire on the altar, and sometimes the meat is eaten by the Kohanim. Both are considered God's angels. The fire is God's angels that bring up, Asa Malachav Rechod Eish Lohet. The Malachim are the ones who were physically consuming the fire angels are consuming the food on the Mizbeach. And sometimes the Kohanim. Kohanim are also like God's emissaries, and they eat. And Shulchan Gavo Kazachu. So as though they're also getting a piece from God's table. So that is the atonement for the ones who brought the sin offering. Let the Kohanim eat something. V'hu adin lish'ar kodashim shochalin hakohanim she'achilatan mitzvah. And the same, even though there's no specific pasuk about it, it's a mitzvah that the Kohanim eat the meat of all the other sacrifices. I know of one sacrifice you don't give anything to the Kohen. Which sacrifice is that? The Pesach. Okay, the Korban Pesach, the entrails and the blood and the forbidden fats are on the altar, but you don't have to give the forearm or the chazeh to the Kohen. The Kohen's supposed to get his own Korban Pesach. It's interesting. So you have all the Kohanim in line there at the temple with the silver cups, the gold cups in line. There's sacrificing going on, but each Kohen before this happens has to know that he's part of some group. With his family, other Israelites, other Levites, whoever it is, he has to know that one Korban of those Korban Pesach is also his. Okay. So there you go. Let's say what's Shiarei Menachot? That means the rest of the Menachos. It means the part of the Mincha that's not the Komets. There's a whole Mincha, which is a lot of flour. So the Kohen, officiating Kohen takes out a Komets, which by the way we'll see there's actually machlokas. How much is a Komets? Okay, our scroll translates to Rashi 3 fingers full, but Mashma Rambam it's 4 fingers worth, not including the thumb. Okay, so the way they have it is you go like this and knock it off with that, knock it off like that. There you get a Komets. The Rambam seems to say, normal grabbing like a child, all 4 non-opposable thumb fingers. Okay, are involved. Okay, so whatever it is, it's not a lot more, but it's more. So everything else is called Isharim and Ahoth. What's left? The majority of the mincha. Miswava seish nemar wa'anothereth mimena. What's left? This is a different shoresh. The nothar is the shoresh yud taf resh. Get there. So nothar, or feminine nothereth, means what's left over. And in Chazal, shiare. That's a more Aramaic / Mishneh shoresh. And that gives rise to what we have now in Hebrew, shin aleph resh, sha'ar. What's left? But it's already in Isaiah, you have the line, sha'ar yashuv, a remnant shall return. So it's a different, they're basically, I guess there's synonyms here. One's more Moshe Rabbeinu style, what's left, and one's more, later. Okay, yochelu aron now. So what's left of mincha after this act of k'misa, taking a handful of flour, so that's what they're supposed to eat. Let's see here. We'ain chatat v'ashamu shiram min hachoth nechlin ela l'zichrei kuna ba'azara. These chatat and asham, the sin offering, the guilt offering, the rest of the menachos, they are all eaten by zichrei kahuna. Wait, aren't there's nikvei kahuna? Or sorry, nakvot kahuna, the females of the kahuna, the males of the priesthood. Yes, there are females of the priesthood, technically speaking, for a few dinim, which we're about to see, and in the temple courtyard. And this was a question we mentioned before. You're not supposed to sit in the temple courtyard, but the Kohanim have to eat everything in the temple courtyard. Do the Kohanim sit and eat, or are they always standing and eating? So many people are scandalized because they say it's not good midos or it's not good for your health. I know that the Rambam says you shouldn't stand and eat. It's not good for your health. Some people take this to be like it's a strict isser. Standing and eating is the worstest thing in the world. I know some Rabbanim are not makbid for that.
No, the worstest thing in the world is walking.
No, it means walking the shuk, in public.
I know.
Fine. But that's bad. That Chazal did say that. But there are many who's like, no, standing and eating is just bad. But apparently, even in the temple, they stood and ate. And Rav Makover has an illustration in one of his books. Apparently, an area that was considered technically Azara, and the Kohanim were sitting and eating. Why? Because when it says no sitting in the Azara, it means the open area of the Azara. That's reserved for the Davidic king. But technically speaking, this lunchroom, which is part of the Azara, the Kohanim have, of course, they sit and eat like menches. Okay, I like to see the answer. V'im ne'echlu ba'eichal ne'echlu. If they happen to be standing in the heichal where they shouldn't, they have their priestly portion of the bread or the meat, and they're eating in the heichal. We saw before how they end up in the heichal, in the actual temple edifice, next to the menorah. Well, sometimes even Amaratzim ended up there. It was such a big crowd; they got pushed into there. Okay, so nechlu, so it's done after the fact. It's okay. All their meal offerings, all their sin offerings, all their guilt offerings. In Holy of Holies, they shall eat it. In this case, Holy of Holies doesn't mean the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant stood, the inner sanctum of the temple. It means the holiest area of the Azara, where one offers the holiest sacrifices. Kodesh Kodashim means Kache Kachim, the Chatas and the Yashim and the Ola. Tochalenu, there it should be in Kol Zachar Yochalto, any male shall eat it. The Torah is also implying, wait a minute, there are those considered part of the priesthood who are not male. V'chein Shalmei Tzibur, also Shalmei Tzibur, one of those brought Shavuos time. Harein Kachataf L'Chasham K'Moshe B'Yanu. That's also treated like Chatas and Asham, eaten by the Kohanim in the holy area. Chazeh V'Shok Shel Shlamim, the parts of the peace offering, which is mostly eaten by regular people. So the breast and the hind leg, which we were discussing last chapter. Nechal Kohanim Zecharim and Kevoth. They can be eaten by Kohanim, both male and female. Soon the Rambam is going to apply, means who is a Kohen female? It's not the Kohen's wife, it's his daughter. Right? How we do that? God told Aaron, I have given these portions to you and to your sons. There's a yud in the word, and to your daughters. So this is a privilege that the daughters of Kohanim get to eat. Remember those parts we were just discussing last chapter? There are parts that are raised up from the Thanksgiving offering and from the ram of the Nazarite when he completes his vow. Shnemar kol terumoth hakodashim asher yarimu b'nei Yisrael Hashem. All that which has been lifted up from the holy foods that the children of Israel shall lift up to God. Nothati lecha uvanecha v'livnothecha. I have given to you this food, and to your sons and to your daughters. So the pasuk specifically says Something that says kol zachar b'vnei Aaron yochalenu. Something that says also the daughters among the children of Aaron shall eat it. The chena b'chor. So too the firstborn animal also brought a sacrifice. Shnei marbo ufsaram yichyeh lach. Okay, their meat shall be for you. Just like the chazei, the breast of weaving, not weaving, of heaving. Okay, that's waved. Let's say heave is to like go like this, and wave is like that. So I said weaving, even though weaving is something entirely different that you do with clothing. And like the right hind leg. So we always said that the girls get to eat that, so they also get to eat this. Everything we just said that they can be eaten by, you have plural or singular, koheneth or kohanoth. Okay, so in the Machon Mamre we see it's plural. In the Koran it's singular, koheneth. Ne'achalim la'avdei kohanim u'linshehem katruma. And by extension, if it can be eaten by the Kohen's daughter, it can also be eaten by the Kohen's slave. It doesn't mean it's Eved Ivri. It doesn't mean a Jew who's indentured in servitude to the Kohen, because he's not owned by the Kohen in any way. The Kohen just has a right to his labor, but not to his goof. Whereas an Eved Kanani is physically owned by the Kohen. So the Eved Kanani, someone born Gentile and became in servitude to the Jew, or born to a Shifcha Kananis. Okay, those are all Eved Kanani, and the Kohen's wife. Okay, so the Kohen's wife, even if she was born non-Kohen, she's of Levite stock or Israelite stock. If you're going to say, I was going to say non-Jewish, if the Kohen's wife was born non-Jewish, the Kohen has no business marrying her. She's invalid. Yeah. Okay, like the Truma, just like Truma, which means, by the way, if it's like Truma, why the Kohen's daughter, the Kohen's wife, and the Kohen's slave, and the Kohen's animal, by the way, can eat Truma that the Kohen had. But the Kohen's daughter becomes disqualified at what point? She's married to a non-Kohen. Oh, she can go back to her kahuna. How? If some of her marriage ends and she has no children from anybody's a non-Kohen, so she goes back to that status. But if she is married at all to a non-Kohen, or has children from a non-Kohen, despite not being married anymore, so she's now not going back to eating the truma anymore. So we saw that case, remember, a few months ago. Yeah, this woman, she was born a Koheneth, so she used to eat truma. She married regular Joe Jew, who was an Israelite. They had a daughter. So this woman stopped eating truma the second her daughter was born. The second she was married, and since her daughter was born. Her daughter is married to a Kohen. Her daughter now eats truma. The child of that Kohen and the daughter, the grandson, ends up being Kohen Gadol. So this woman was born a Koheneth, and now she's widowed. Her daughter is long passed away. Her grandson is Kohen Gadol. Her father was Kohen Gadol. She used to eat truma. She's widowed now. She doesn't have an Israelite husband. She doesn't have an Israelite daughter. Her only living descendant is the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol eats truma. Her father, the Kohen Gadol, eats truma, but she cannot eat truma. Why? Because she has a descendant through an Israelite. She has a living descendant through an Israelite. Her daughter had a child. So it says an interesting case works out. Okay. Good to review these interesting cases. Okay. Let's see the next thing. It's good. Like I said, it's fun sugyas. The chulan ne'achalim b'chol ha'ir. All these, what we call chadshei kalim, like the shlamim, is eaten throughout what's considered halachically Jerusalem. We saw the Makbili as a map. Where was halachic Jerusalem? It doesn't overlap with the current walls of the old city. The current old cities incorporates a lot more areas to the north that were not halachically Jerusalem, and leaves out many areas to the south. Okay, as it says, this weave offering, heave offering, and the lifted up shok, they should be eaten in a pure place. Doesn't say kadosh. Kadosh means the temple courtyard. In this case, tahor means the rest of Jerusalem. No na marbem b'makom kadosh sheyazara ela tahor. It doesn't say kadosh, which is the yazara. It means the tahor area. Shu kol machane Yisrael, and that's all of the machane Yisrael, which he said corresponds to Jerusalem. Sheknegdol deroth to Jerusalem. Okay. And the same halacha applies to the tithe animal, the 10th animal, and the Passover. They have to be eaten within halachic Jerusalem, within the walls. Even if the walls are no longer standing, by the way, as long as it's within those borders. Sharehin kodashim kalin kashlamim. These are also less holy sacrificial foods, just like the shlamim, the peace offering. While halanoth v'ovi homa kilifnim. You sometimes have these large windows. The walls were thick. Right? They're made of thick stone.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually sit in the doorway. The doorway has some amushes to it, and so does the window. So a person's within the window or the doorway, so it's external inside. Okay, kilifnim. Good halacha to know. Hashlamim ne'achalim b'yom hazvicha v'chol halayla. This is an important sugya that the Rambam never even held like Tosfos regarding Pesach. We're going to see in a minute. The shlamim are eaten the day they are to be slaughtered, ritually slaughtered in the temple, and the ensuing night. Okay, if he slaughtered at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he has the rest of that afternoon and the next night to eat them. The chol yom ha'machorath ad shetishkachama, and the entire next day until sundown.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got 24 hours plus a few hours until sundown. Okay, shnemar. It says biyom hakrivot tzivcho ye'achel. On the day it is brought as a sacrifice, it shall be eaten. Umi maharath, and on the next day. By the way, there's no vav in mocharath. It's not cholam. It's a kamatz katan. Le'im he'achol yachel mi b'sar zevach shlema b'yom shlishi. But if chas v'shalom were to be eaten on day 3, day 2 is the last day. Day 1 is the day it's slaughtered. Day 2 is the next day, but not day 3. Nimtzeit lamed. So you learn from this that what shein ne'achalim shnei yamim v'layla chad. They could be eaten for 2 days and 1 night, the night in the middle. Bein chelak hakohanim, bein chelak habealim. Whether you're talking about the portions that the kohanim get, then it's eaten Nazara, or the part that the owners get to eat in the rest of Jerusalem. And the same applies to the Bechor and the Meiser. But what doesn't apply to Pesach? Pesach you get 1 night. Okay. By the way, what is the Rambam saying here? Tishka Chama and 1 day. It is very clear from this that the Rambam, like he said many times in laws of Ava and other places, the line between day and night for all these halachas is Shkia. It always is Shkia. It's only for 3 dinim that the Rambam says you have this extra idea of tseis. And Hilchot Shabbos, the Rambam says when we say the time between Shkia and Sheish, tseis, Ben Hashmashes is a suffix in all regards. The Rambam's limiting that to Hilchot Shabbos. We even said even in Yontif already it's a question if the Rambam says you have to wait until tseis to let out Yontif. Okay, that was a chiddush, but you could be medaik that in the Rambam. The Rambam throughout says that the line between night and day is always Shkia. Okay, that's the line. That's the definition. Okay, and this is just another example, and the sources seem to say that also. Shlamim, we said that they're offered then, but the Toda, here's a difference. The Shlamim gets 2 days in the intervening night. The Toda afal pishi kodashim kalim, even though it's also lower holiness. It's not an olaf. It's not a chatas or an asham. Einan necheleth ela biyom azvicha im alayla. You get 1 day, the day it's offered, and the ensuing night, but not the next day. Morning comes, it's already invalid. Shnemarba, it says concerning this Thanksgiving offering, biyom HaKorbanot ye'achel. So by the way, it's a lot of meat, a lot of bread, and you got 1 night to eat it, basically. It should be eaten the day it's offered. Lo yaniach mimenu ad boker. Do not leave any of it yaniach with a patach, because it's in the Torah that way. Lohaniach usually in the Torah means to put it down. From the word menucha, nun vavchet. With yaniach, with the dagesh and nun means a different shorsh altogether. It means place it. Okay? Place it and leave it alone. Which, by the way, like the Mishneh Berurah says, is the argument against saying lohaniach tefillin. Because in that case it would mean to set aside. Ignore them. Okay? Do not ignore it until the morning. It means make sure to take care of it before morning comes. Same thing with the ram of the Nazir and the bread that comes with it. Whether it's the part that goes to the Kohanim or the owners to eat, it has to be eaten that very day or that night. You don't get a second day. Same applies to sin offerings, guilt offerings, Shalmei Tzibur, the special lambs offered on Shavuot, and to what remains of the menachos, the parts of menachos that the Kohanim are supposed to eat. Shakol ne'achal liyom v'layla. They're to be eaten that very day or the ensuing night. Shnemar b'yom HaKorbanot ye'achel. They're to be eaten on the day that they're brought as sacrifice. Kol HaKorbanot b'mashma. All the korbanot are on the understanding. Okay. What does it say here? Hold on, I lost it. Chutz min hashlamim, except for the peace offering, which you get more time. Sheperish ben hakatuv. The pasuk says explicitly is more time than just that day and the night. The Bechor Meiser shall Adom Yohem, and the Bechor and Meiser are also eaten like that, so you have time. So we mentioned Pesach; it's explicitly you also have that night. Now here it says Kol Elo Ne'achalim Liyom V'Layla. When it says you have that day and that night to eat him, Din Torah She'Nachlim Ad Shila Amud HaShachar. Rabbi Gamliel, we're in the first Mishneh in Shas. Really, you have until daybreak, the crack of dawn, which is before the sun comes out, to eat them. In order to keep you away from, being negligent and waiting until dawn to eat it, I don't know, staying up all night. It's safe to say they should only be eaten by midnight. And like Pesach also, same thing.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So Makbili has a diuk over here. He says, you compare this to Kriyas Shema, that in Kriyas Shema, really, l'chadchila, you're supposed to make sure to say it by midnight. But if you missed it, so say it after midnight, like Rabbi Gamliel says. But here, there's no b'diavad. It says, ein ne'achalim. Here, sacrificial food, you don't, midnight's the cutoff line. Chazal institute a cutoff line. You can't say, well, b'diavad, I'll eat it after midnight. It's not they told you, make sure to eat it before midnight, but if you missed it, so continue eating. No. Don't eat it after midnight. And this is actually a machlokes. Okay, so I think that they point out here. So there's Mefarshim who say that but after midnight you can. And so some say no, you can't. So Makbili says, interpret the Rambam saying no, you can't eat it. Ein ne'achalim. That's it. You missed it. You had until dawn. It's all instituted until midnight, and now that's it. Cutoff time. Now I'd like to point out here something that we've said before. There's nowhere in Shas that says explicitly that Korban Pesach has to be eaten after Tzeis. How do the Tosafos know it? Because it says in Ezehu Mekoman, the Pesach Nechal Laila Achad. And that means Laila. So Laila means after Tzeis. First of all, the Rambam never said Laila means after Tzeis. The Rambam says many places Laila is after Shkia. Okay? So it doesn't, the Korban Pesach maybe could, according to the Rishonim who hold like the Rambam, which is many before the Tosafos, the line was Shkia. But not only that, when Ezehu Mekoman in context says that the Pesach is eaten l'layla, it says Laila Echad, one night. It doesn't mean from Tzeis until dawn. It means la'afuke, the day. Because all the other korbanos, we just said, you can eat it the day it's offered and the ensuing night, and sometimes you get the next day. And Korban Pesach is so much limited, you can't eat it the day it's offered. Korban Pesach is unlike Bechor and Meiser and Shlamim. If you were to sacrifice the Korban Pesach at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you walk to your place where you're going to roast it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if that had been a Bechor or Meiser or Shlamim, you could start eating it then. But Korban Pesach, you have to wait until it's Passover, the 15th of the month, to actually start eating it. As I pointed out, it seems from the pasuk and the way Rashi explains it. Rashi, before the Tosafos came up with this chiddush, Rashi on Chumash and to Bracha seems to say that then this pshat, this goes with Unkelos also, that the time for eating Korban Pesach is at Shkia, Kivo Hashemesh. And as we pointed out, it seems also from the pasuk in Shmos that the eating of the matzah starts whenever Tosefes of the holiday starts, which could even be before Shkia. Of course, by the way, I also take it for granted. If you have someone who's waiting for Hari of Shemesh to become pure, because he went to the mikveh, whatever it was, so his purity only kicks in with Tzeis. So even though others in his group can be eating Korban Pesach based on what's saying from basically when the holiday starts, the old way of thinking, he has to wait until Tzeis to do it. So that's I'm saying. The Rambam never had a havamina that you have to wait until Tzeis to eat Korban Pesach if you're already fully pure. And in context, when the Mishneh said Korban Pesach is eaten balayla, it meant la'afuke the yom it's slaughtered, not only after Tzeis HaKochavim, which is by the way very very frustrating, but whatever. Okay, let's see the next thing. This is a good one. Kol HaKorbanos bein kachi kachim bein kachi kalim. Whatever the sacrifice you're dealing with. People who are pure and people who are circumcised. Okay, so wait a minute. Korban Pesach specifically has a mitzvah also. It has to be eaten by the circumcised. So what's the chiddush? All korbanos can only be eaten by people who are circumcised. Okay, So there, Korban Pesach, no, it's specific because Korban Pesach is unique among the Korbanos. It turns everybody into a Kohen. Because Kohanim who are uncircumcised are not even allowed to serve as Kohanim. Right? So too, because Korban Pesach turns everybody into Kohanim, so Korban Pesach has its own new standards. Well, it says Korban Pesach should not be offered outside the temple. But every Korban is supposed to be offered outside the temple. No, there's a Chiddush because Korban Pesach is different. Okay? Korban Pesach, we either have, suddenly it's a unique rule, which makes the people who are eating it like Kohanim, or this rule is set again, even though it applies equally to all the other Korbanos, because Korban Pesach is so special. So they have to be pure and they have to be moving. In this case, purity, what about Korban Pesach? Technically speaking, people who are impure can eat Korban Pesach. If everybody, the majority are Tmei Meis, so actually people who are Tmei Meis will eat Korban Pesach. That's the one exception. If you have some other form of Tumah on you, let's say they did Korban Pesach. This past year, we could have done Korban Pesach with Tumah. So all the Tmei Meis were going to eat Korban Pesach. If you have any other Tumah, you can't eat Korban Pesach. You have to make sure at least remove the other forms of Tumah. Usual ones, Tumas Keri, that's the most common one, and Tumas Nida for women. So they have to remove that. Afilu Hariv Shimsho. Let's say Tseisa Kochavim happened. The sun went down, the stars came out. The lo hevi kaparatho, but he hasn't offered the korban that makes him pure. There are certain people who are mechusarei kapara, which is another also chapter over here. The Rambam says, who are the mechusarei kapara? No, I don't have it in this book. Remember the mechusarei kapara? It's in the korbanos there. Good to say it. I always forget. This is the type of thing that you should remember as a child, so you can just say it off the top of your head, right? I'll read it to you. Well, many of us were filling our heads with video games and things like that instead of learning Mishnayos by heart. Big mistake. So that's what we learn now to make up for past mistakes of the past. So it says here are the four mechusarei kapara. Okay, Yoledes Zav Mitzorah and the Zava. Okay, Zav and Zava, Yoledes and Mitzorah. Yoledes means obviously Zav is a person with those apparently gonorrhea. A Zav is a woman who has funny discharges. A Yoledes is a woman who gave birth, and the Mitzorah is the guy who's recovering from Saras. Technically speaking, a ger is in this also. Okay, and that's the next paragraph the Rambam brings, but he's not Mekusar Kapara because he has nothing for which to atone. He just needs to bring a sacrifice in order to do this. So he's like 4.5. Okay, so he says here, if a person is Mekusar Kapara, okay, so if he's lacking sacrifice also, so he still has to he can't eat the korban. A tumtum, what's a tumtum? Means we don't know what he is. Okay. Nowadays I heard this alphabet stuff has gone so crazy. And nowadays I was told there's a hospital in America and even Maimonides in Brooklyn. What? Want some water? Yeah, please. Go ahead. The kid brought us a whole bottle before. Okay. That they ask that they came up with a new Marxist word. Just change the word's meaning. You don't have to change the law, just change the word. And the law has to be applied the same way, So instead of, you say that used to be people were assigned what they are at birth. The doctor says, congratulations, you have a boy. No, you're assigning him. You're going, well, how do you know it's a boy? Well, it's pretty much a boy. That's how it works. No, nowadays, they don't even assign, they don't even ask. Instead, they ask the parent. So the parent gets to assign, and they ask you, is this a boy or a girl? What do you want to call it? Okay? That's insane. It's insane. So mamish insanity. You think you're the crazy person, And by the way, people go along with this nonsense. Okay, the tumtum is someone who actually has some sort of genital malform, not deformity, just not formed enough, so you can't tell what it is. Lefishu safek ariel. Perhaps he's a male and he's just lacking circumcision. But what are you going to circumcise? Aval androgynous, the both. What's called hermaphrodite. Yera'eli shehu ochel bekodashim kalim. Androgynous from the Greek, it means he, she. Andro is he. Genus is she. I think hermaphrodite comes more for the Latin.
No.
Doesn't? From Aphrodite. Oh, because Aphrodite is Aphrodite. So what was Aphrodite in Latin? The Roman name for her? Venus? It was Venus? Okay. So they're both Greek. I thought one's Latin, one's Greek. No, yeah, you're right. Okay. Yera'eli shehu ochel bekodashim kalim. Okay. Perhaps if the androgynous, as at least his maleness is circumcised, so he would be able to eat the kachim kalim. can't serve as a Kohen, but at least he's chayiv in Korban Pesach like most women. The tumtum is a problem. The tumtum's obligated, whether he's male or female, he's got to eat Korban Pesach, but he's prevented from Korban Pesach because he's an oral. Okay, interesting. And there's the last thing. Mutar lechol kodashim b'chol ma'achol. You can eat the kodashim any way you want. Okay, as long as it's not, when it's offered. Korban Pesach is more limited, obviously, but it means you can make the sandwich whichever way you want. Okay. Afilo kohanim mutarin lechol chalkam bein mikodashim kalim bein mikodesh kodshei kodashim. Whichever chelik the kohanim get from the holy sacrifice, less holy ones, lechol ma'achol, any way they want. U'leshanoth ba'achilothon, change it around. U'chlam tzulim shlukim uvushalim. They can eat it roasted, fully cooked, dunk it in water, pot roasted, whichever way it wants. They could spice it with anything that they want that's even non-sacrificial food or non-holy food. Okay, they bring in some salt, garlic, and black pepper, which is what you're supposed to put on meat, right? Min Torah. So that could be chulin. Aval lo tivlei truma. They should not put in spices that came from truma. They shouldn't put on some, cooking wine. Cooking wine could be truma, right? The truma is wine, so it's good to cook meat with wine. They shouldn't do that. Sometimes that you cook the meat, a lot of the gravy is not going to get eaten. So if you made the gravy out of truma wine, so that'd be a problem. The bones, they really had they ate some good cow in the temple. What do you do with the bones afterwards? Those are mutter. They no longer have any holiness. You could turn them into any kelim you want. The blood that came out of the temple was sold by the temple the temple treasury as fertilizer.
Right.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was technically non-holy.
What about the marrow?
Marrow that you eat, so that should be eaten.
Okay, so you're saying after
the bones, after it's all done, the bones.
Okay, so it doesn't mean the bones even intact. It means the bones once.
Yeah, he's talking about using the bones to make kalim. You're reforming the bones. And with that, I guess we'll close. We'll wish everybody a happy and healthy new year. May we see that this year, the reinstitution. This year should have the reinstitution of the temple service and the rebuilding of the temple. And we should all live to see that and attend the service. Have a good one and a good Shabbos.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.